All right, so today we are going to focus on pronunciation. Pronunciation means how you say, how you speak words, sounds, sentences in a language, today in English. And so I'm going to be doing some reading, and I want you to not focus on the meaning. The meaning is a little bit difficult because it comes from a novel, literature. So just focus on the pronunciation and try to pay attention to the difference when I read something together, that means sentences, compared to just saying one word. So I'm going to read this one time, and then I'm going to go back, and you can pay attention to and copy the sounds for pronunciation of sentences and words. Okay? So I'm going to read one time. By now he had stared at the window all through a late summer, so hot and wet that the air both day and night felt like breathing through a dish rag. So damp it caused fresh sheets to sour under him and tiny black mushrooms to grow overnight from the limp pages of the book on his bedside table. Inman suspected that after such long examination, the gray window had finally said about all it had to say. That morning, though, it surprised him, for it brought to mind a lost memory of sitting in school. A similar tall window beside him framing a scene of pastures, and low green ridges terracing up to the vast hump of a cold mountain. So, I know that's difficult, right? I'm going to go through it again, really slowly. So pay attention and try to copy some of the sounds that I say. The first sentence. By now, he had stared at the window all through a late summer. So that's the first part. That's each word correctly pronounced, correctly said. But when we read the sentence, we don't say it all like that. We don't say, by now he had. We don't say each word so clearly. What we do is put the words together so that there is flow. Flow means that one word goes to the next word naturally. And some words should be stressed. That means stronger than other words. If usually the word is important in the sentence, that word might be stretched out or spoken more strongly, a little more loudly. Okay? So now let's read it in a more natural way. By now, he had stared at the window all through a late summer. By now, not by now. By now, by now, by now, by now. He had stared. He had stared. So I put he had really close together like it is one word. He had stared at the, and I don't say at the. I say at the, at. So sometimes when you're reading a sentence, the T sound should be stopped, should be paused. At. To replace it. But you can't just say the summer. The window. That doesn't work. You don't know there's a T there. So you at least have to stop your voice if you're going to take out the T sound. And that will let you read it more smoothly. If you say at the window, it sounds almost too sharp. It doesn't sound very natural. By now, he had stared at the window all through a late summer. You can say a late summer or a late summer, and both sound okay. A late summer or a late eight. Notice my voice stops. It must stop. You can't say a lay summer. It doesn't sound good. A late summer or a late summer. So hot and wet that the air, both day and night, felt like breathing through a dish rag. So hot and wet that the air, both day and night, felt like breathing through a dish rag. So that is said correctly, but it doesn't sound natural. So here's how we can say it naturally. So hot and wet. So I don't really say and wet. I say and wet. So hot and wet and wet. A little bit of a D sound. And wet, duet, 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 duet. It sounds like duet, not and wet. And wet, and wet. So hot and wet. So hot and wet. So hot and wet. So that's the natural way. That the air. So I don't say that the air. I say that. And remember, when we want to read the sentence, we can stop the T sound. But you can't say the air. That doesn't sound right. You can take out the T, but you need to at least stop your voice. That the air, both day and night. Night, we should say night. Probably not night. Night sounds a little strange. So hot and wet that the air, both day and night, felt like breathing through a dish rag. Not through a dish rag. Through a dish rag. Through a dish rag. Through a dish rag. It's one continuous sound. Through a dish rag. Okay? So, sometimes we put these words really closely together because we don't want to focus on them. Right? When I said that the air, I don't really need to focus on that the. It needs to be there because of grammar, but that's not the focus of the sentence. That's not the most important part of the sentence. So we can say it really fast and we can put the sounds together. That the air. That the air, both day and night, or day and night, both are okay, felt like breathing through a dish rag. So damp, it caused fresh sheets of sour under him. Fresh sheets. It caused, both are okay. It caused or it caused. You can do both. So damp. So I want to focus on so. It's an important part of the sentence. So I will say, so damp. So damp. It caused fresh sheets. Now, I don't say fresh sheets. I said fresh sheets. Fresh sheets. Fresh sheets. So if you have an end sound that's the same as a beginning sound, usually you can put these words together as well. It caused fresh sheets to sour under him. And I think sour is a key word, so I didn't say to sour under him. To sour under him. Now, you can choose what you think is important, but usually people will focus on this word. Fresh sheets to sour under him. We can emphasize it. We can stress it. Fresh sheets to sour under him. And tiny, and I again focus on the adjective. Tiny, not and tiny black mushrooms. No. And tiny black mushrooms. I make tiny stronger. And tiny black mushrooms to grow overnight from the limp pages or limp pages, because there's a P and a P, limp pages. Limp ends with a P and pages begins with a P. So we can say limp pages, not limb pages. We still have to pause. There's a small stop there. If you say limb pages, it doesn't sound right. I don't know that there's a letter that I'm skipping. I don't know that you're putting two words together. It sounds too much like one word. So you have to stop your voice. Limp pages, limp pages, limp pages. Okay? That's actually really important for understanding what people are saying. Okay, it caused fresh sheets to sour under him and tiny black mushrooms to grow overnight. Overnight. From the limp pages of the book, not the book, the book, of the book on his bedside table. Of the book on his bedside table. Bedside table. Of the book on his bedside table. Bedside table. I don't stop between bedside and table. I don't say bedside table. Bedside table. Side table. Bedside table. So you can put these two words together. D and T can usually be put together into one sound. Table. Okay. Inman. Now, I'm saying the person's name, so I'm going to kind of focus on it, stress it at the beginning of the sentence. Inman suspected that after such long examination, the gray window had finally said about all it had to say. Inman suspected that after such long examination, the gray window had finally said about all it had to say. So notice when I read the sentence that my voice is always going up and down. I'm focusing on words, or I'm not focusing on other words. And I'm putting some sounds together so there is flow between words, right? So the sentence sounds smooth. Inman suspected that after such long examination, the gray window had finally said about all it had to say. So at the end of the sentence, usually there's a falling tone. To say. To say. So usually there's a falling tone at the end of a sentence. All it had to say. And all it had is really put together so that it sounds like one word. All it had, all it had, all it had, all it had, not all it had, all it had, all it had to say. All it had to say. So, it's a little bit difficult to get this, but if you practice putting these together and trying to say them smoothly, you'll get it. One thing to remember, though, is that you can't just remove a sound. Because if I said, not all it, but all it had, then it wouldn't be clear. Suddenly, the meaning is gone. I don't understand. You have to stop your voice if you take the T sound out. All it had to say. It's really important. That morning, though, it surprised him. So I focused on surprised. That morning, and I said that, not that. But if you want to say that morning, that's okay. It's not wrong, and it sounds okay. It sounds good. That morning, or that morning, at that morning, though. So when you have a comma, a word, and a comma, that word there usually functions with a tone that goes down and up. Like that. Like Chinese. That morning, though, it surprised him. So we can focus on surprise. I make my voice go up for surprised because I want to emphasize it. It surprised him. For it brought to mind a lost memory of sitting in school. For it brought to mind a lost memory of sitting in school. For it. So when you want to read the whole sentence, put these two together. For it brought to mind, not to mind, not brought to mind. To is too strong. To is a small word, and it's just there for grammar. So we don't need to focus on the word. We don't need to stress the word. So we say ta. Brought to mind, brought to mind, brought to mind, Okay? It surprised him, for it brought to mind a lost memory. And I make lost memory very long, very slow, because I want to focus on that. So you focus on content by raising your voice, stretching it out, and you make small words like to sound like ta, because you don't want to focus on them usually. You want to make them shorter because they're only there for grammar. Okay. Brought to mind a lost memory of sitting in school, a similar tall window beside him. Or we could say a lost memory of sitting in school. Sitting in school. Maybe it should be read like this. Sitting in school, not sitting in school. Sitting in school. Sitting in school. Sitting in school. Not sitting. Sitting in. Nyin. Sitting in. Of sitting in school. Sitting in school. Sitting in school. Ng. The back of my tongue is touching the top of my mouth. Nya. Sitting in school. A similar tall window beside him, framing a scene of pastures and low green ridges. A similar tall window beside him, framing a scene of pastures and low green ridges. So that's each word. And again, a similar tall window, a similar, not a similar, a similar tall window. We can put these two words together. Tall window. Beside him, framing a, so we make this a connected word, framing a scene, not framing a scene, framing a scene of pastures and low green ridges. Nothing special here. You can read this flat. Low green ridges. Terracing up to the vast hump of Cold Mountain. To, very short sound. To the vast hump of Cold Mountain. Terracing up to the vast hump of Cold Mountain. By now he had stared at the window all through a late summer, so hot and wet that the air both day and night felt like breathing through a dish rag. So damp it caused fresh sheets to sour under him, and tiny black mushrooms to grow overnight from the limp pages of the book on his bedside table. Inman suspected that, after such long examination, the grey window had finally said about all it had to say. That morning, though, it surprised him, for it brought to mind a lost memory of sitting in school. A similar tall window beside him, framing a scene of pastures and low green ridges, terracing up to the vast hump of Cold Mountain. Okay, so if you have any questions, just ask me on WeChat, and I will see you next time.